April 2026. Humanoid robots line up on a starting grid in Beijing and run a half marathon in public in front of thousands of people. That's not a demo behind closed doors. That's a public stress test. Everybody thinks China got here by copying. Cheap labor, stolen blueprints, other people's ideas. The West invents, China photocopies. That's not the full story. And believing it may be the most expensive mistake the West has made in 40 years. Because in 1978, the average Chinese citizen earned about $156 a year, roughly the same as someone in Bangladesh. Today, China files more patents than any other country on Earth. You don't photocopy your way there. So today we're taking apart the 3 stories the West tells itself about China. Then we're going to look at the machine that actually did this, and at the bill that came with it. Before the how, the where. Because most people are still working from a scoreboard that's 20 years out of date. Start with one city. In 1980, Shenzhen was a fishing town of around 30,000 people. Today it's a metropolis of roughly 17 million, and it is the home of Huawei, Tencent, and BYD. 46 years from almost nothing. Now the numbers. Cars. BYD passed Tesla to become the largest electric vehicle maker in the world. Of every 10 electric cars built on this planet, roughly 7 come out of a Chinese factory. Batteries. China controls around 3/4 of global lithium battery production. No batteries, no storage. No storage, no grid, no electric car. Energy. China hit its 2030 clean energy target years ahead of schedule. Robots. The large majority of the world's humanoid robots now come from Chinese companies. And then, January 2025. A startup almost nobody outside China had heard of releases an artificial intelligence model that performs in the same league as the best American models, trained for a fraction of the cost without access to the most advanced chips. In a single trading day, NVIDIA loses around $600 billion of market value. That is not a copy. That is a standard. And when the Australian Strategic Policy Institute tracked the critical technologies of the next 30 years, it found China leading in the overwhelming majority of them. So how did we get it this wrong? 3 stories and all 3 are wrong. Before I take them apart, if you want more of these, subscribe. It takes 1 second. Story number 1, and the most popular, they stole it. The official version goes like this. China built its industry on Western technology it never paid for. Copy designs, reverse engineered products, blueprints walking out the door. Clean. Case closed, right? Wrong. Mostly they didn't have to steal anything. It was handed over and the West signed the paperwork. Deng Xiaoping, the man who opened China in 1978, built enclaves called special economic zones, capitalist islands inside a communist country, tax breaks, relaxed rules, foreign money welcome, with one condition written into the rules. To sell to Chinese consumers, a foreign company generally had to operate through a joint venture with a Chinese partner. Explained like you're 5, you want to sell pizza in the biggest city on earth. The city says yes, on one condition. You take a local partner into your kitchen. He watches the dough. He learns the oven. He keeps the recipe. 10 years later, he opens across the street, and he didn't steal anything. It was in the contract you signed. Volkswagen arrived. About a decade later, China was building cars. Sony and Philips set up shop. About a decade later, China was building its own televisions. Nobody said no, because nobody says no to 1 billion consumers, or to labor costing tens of dollars a month against roughly 2,000 in the United States. Now, was there also outright theft? Yes. Western governments have documented and prosecuted industrial espionage cases for years, and that's a real part of the picture. But here's why "they copied us" stops working as an explanation. You cannot copy something that doesn't exist yet. Nobody had a DeepSeek to copy. Nobody had a BYD blade battery to copy. When the student starts filing more patents than the teacher, copy isn't analysis anymore. It's comfort. Story number 2. Fine, but it's just cheap labor, sweatshops. The moment wages rise, the whole thing collapses. Wages did rise enormously. Chinese manufacturing wages have multiplied many times over since the 1990s, and China is no longer the cheap option in Asia. And here's the test that kills the theory. There are cheaper countries. Vietnam is cheaper. Bangladesh is cheaper. Mexico is cheaper, and it's next door to the American market. Not one of them has produced a BYD, a Huawei, or a CATL, so it was never the price of a worker. It was density. Explain like you're 5. You're building a prototype. In Ohio, you order a custom part and it ships in 3 weeks. In Shenzhen, you walk 4 blocks. The machine shop, the injection molder, the circuit board house, the guy who plates the connectors, all of them are inside 1 metro ride. 3 weeks becomes 1 afternoon. Speed of iteration, not price of labor, that's the moat. And a moat built out of geography and supply chains does not move because you raised a tariff. Then add the second layer. Chinese plants routinely run 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When the chief executive of Ford came back from touring Chinese factories, he described what he had seen in public, and he did not describe a sweatshop. He described an existential threat to his own industry. That isn't cheap, that's fast, and speed compounds. Every extra cycle you run while your competitor runs one, you learn twice. Story number 3, and it's the most comforting of all. None of this matters because the whole thing is about to collapse anyway. Ghost cities, Evergrande, a population falling off a cliff. Here's the part I'm not going to argue with. All 3 of those are real. We're going to spend 2 minutes on them shortly because they are the price of everything you just heard. But notice what's being done with them. There's a bill and the machine doesn't work, are 2 completely different claims. And people keep using the first one to avoid dealing with the second. So watch what actually happened the last time the bill came due. In 2019, Washington blacklisted Huawei. The consensus was that China had been cut off at the knees. 4 years later, a Chinese foundry was producing 7-nanometer chips, and Huawei was shipping phones running processors it had designed itself. Now be precise about this, because the easy version is wrong. The state fund behind that push had been running since 2014, 5 years before the blacklist. The sanctions didn't create the program, they multiplied it. That's the pattern people keep missing. This is not a country that stops when it hits a wall. It's a country that reallocates faster than anyone expects. To understand how, you have to understand the machine. 3 gears. Gear 1, the plan. Every 5 years, the Chinese state publishes a document naming the sectors it intends to dominate. It isn't classified. You can read it in translation the week it comes out. The plan isn't an order, it's a competition. Provincial officials are promoted on how well they deliver against it. So more than 30 provinces race each other to attract the investment, build the plant, hit the number. Explained like you're 5, it's a National League table, and the prize is your own career. What that buys is a capability almost no democracy has, allocating enormous amounts of capital on a 20 or 30-year horizon, with no election to win in the middle and no opposition to convince. So when China decided electric vehicles were the future, it didn't subsidize a car. It built the mining, the refining, the battery chemistry, the charging network, and the factories at the same time. Gear 2, absorption. The joint venture rule was the entry fee, applied for 30 years, industry after industry. High-speed rail, solar, wind, telecoms. Foreign firms brought the technology in, Chinese partners kept it. Gear 3, people. One morning every June, roughly 13 million students sit the Gaokao, the National University Entrance Exam. Construction stops near the test centers, one exam, and it reroutes a life. For over a decade, Chinese provinces have topped the international rankings in mathematics and science, ahead of Singapore, ahead of Japan, ahead of every Western country. It worked so well that China stopped needing to import its winners. The founders of Huawei, of BYD, and of DeepSeek were all educated in China, and the ones who did leave started coming home. 20 years ago, roughly 30% of Chinese students who studied overseas returned. By 2023, it was around 80%. There's a nickname for them in Mandarin, sea turtles. They travel, and they always come back. Plan, absorption, people. That's the machine. It's public, it's boring, and it has been running for 48 years while the West argued about whether to take it seriously. But every gear in it was paid for, and the invoice is coming due right now. Now the part the highlight reels leave out. 4 lines on the invoice. Line 1, the children. In 1979, the state decided how many children its citizens were allowed to have. 1. For 30 years, the math worked exactly as designed. A vast working-age population, almost no retirees. That dividend financed the workshop of the world. Then the state tried to switch it off. 2 children allowed in 2015, no effect. 3 in 2021, no effect. Then every limit removed. Births have fallen by roughly half in under a decade. You can force people not to have children. You cannot force them to want them. Line 2, the workers. The factories needed hands, and the hands came from the countryside. Under the hukou system, your rights follow your birthplace, not your address. A farmer from Sichuan who moves to Shanghai has historically had no right to enroll his children in local schools. Roughly 300 million workers, second class in their own country. Tens of millions of children raised by grandparents in villages their parents left. Line 3, the concrete. Growth needed a number, and the number was construction. Build more, GDP goes up. GDP goes up, the local official gets promoted. At the peak, the majority of household wealth was sitting in property. Cities were built for 1 million people and lived in by 100,000. When Evergrande, one of the largest developers in the country, collapsed in 2021, hundreds of thousands of families discovered that the apartment they had already paid for did not exist. Line 4, the silence. The state that picks winners also picks losers. In 2020, the founder of Alibaba publicly criticized Chinese financial regulators. Days later, what would have been the largest stock market listing in history, around $34 billion, was pulled. He was not seen in public for months. 4 lines, all of them still open. So, has China already won? That's the wrong question. The right one is what winning cost, and whether anyone else would ever pay it. And that's where the third story falls apart. The bill is real. It just isn't a refutation. A machine can work perfectly and still cost more than anyone else would agree to spend, because none of those trade-offs were side effects. The one-child policy, the hukou, the joint venture rule, the concrete, the silence. They weren't the price of the miracle. They were the mechanism of it. China didn't grow despite them. It grew because of them. And it is paying for them now, all at once, in the same decade. Everybody thinks China got here by copying. China got here by making choices no democracy would make, in public, for 48 years, while the West told itself a story comfortable enough that it never had to look. And here's the uncomfortable part if you're watching this from the United States. You can't copy the plan without copying the price, but you can stop being surprised. Every move in this video was announced years in advance, in a document translated into English that almost nobody read. So tell me in the comments which piece of this machine you want taken apart next. I read every single one.